If everybody has hit the accept button, welcome to Drakewell Museum and Park Winter Academy. My name is Sarah Goodman and I'm the museum educator here at Drakewell. And I'm also your moderator for the evening. For those of you that are unfamiliar with us, the museum is located in Titusville, Pennsylvania, and is one of 24 historic sites owned by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and is part of the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. We are supported by our Friends of Drakewell Incorporated, which is our nonprofit group. We preserve and interpret the site of the Drake Well, chronicling the birth and development of the petroleum industry in Pennsylvania and its growth into a global enterprise. We are pleased to have you join us this evening for this event, and we are also pleased to welcome Cecile. Cecile, I told you I was going to stumble on your name, even though it's super simple. Cecile Stelter. For presenting and helping us with this program. So we really welcome her. Cecile is the district forester for Cornplanter Forest District number 14. She is a Penn State graduate, receiving her BS in forest science. And she also has her degree in forest management. She has worked for the National Park Service and the U.S. Forest Service, and since 1998 has been employed with the DCNR, so congratulations on that. And she is part of the Bureau of Forestry. So we welcome Cecile here tonight to join us. And one thing I forgot, just a reminder that please leave your cameras on, turned off and your mics off while Cecile and I are presenting. But when we open it up for Q&A, you're more than welcome to turn your camera on and ask questions. If you want to ask a question during the presentation, just place it in the chat at the bottom of the screen so that we can follow up on your questions and things. Or if you have a comment about something, just place it in the chat. So without further ado, let's welcome Cecile to our program this evening. So thank you, Cecile. I'll let you take the floor.
Okay, hey, thank you so much. Oh, there we go. There we go. So tonight we're going to talk about why we would want to burn wood. What wood to burn. I'll give you some facts about some measurements of firewood, some preparation of firewood, some of the tools that we use for collecting firewood and processing it. And finally, I'll end with some sources of firewood. So why would we want to burn wood? Well, there's many advantages to burning wood. On a cold night like tonight, what is better than cozying up in front of a nice burning fire that's crackling and it's providing its warmth, and it's really quite comforting for people to be out in front of a fire. And they even say that when people are lost in the woods, one of the things you should try and do is build a fire because it's going to keep you calmer. So there is a sense of comfort to fires. If you have wood on your property, you can actually have a source of heat and fuel at literally no cost, or at least no cost for the fuel itself. There's always a cost for your time and the other things that are required to cut the firewood. If you do have a forest or access to a forest, you can actually improve the health and quality of the forest or the woodlot by using firewood. And you can cut out the diseased or the dead trees, and you make room for the younger trees, the trees, the other trees that are left for more growing space. So it actually, by using firewood, we can improve our forests. If you don't have a source of wood, you can buy firewood from local sources, and that way the money stays local and it can create jobs, and it's kind of like the forestry farm market. Also, if you buy local, you're not bringing invasive insects into the region, and that's always a good thing. And heating with wood is very economical. A lot of the other fuel types, there's a lot of variation in the cost. We know that with gasoline. We've seen gasoline prices go up and down, and wood tends to stay fairly constant. And it's like everything, even these days with the increase in inflation, the wood costs are going up as well. But most of all, why would we? One of the best advantages to why we would burn wood is that woods and trees are sustainable. They are a sustainable source of heat and energy. Now, there are always disadvantages to burning as well. So there are some concerns with air pollution, especially with the elderly, sometimes young children, or people with breathing problems, because wood does emit tiny particles, but those particles do eventually fall to the ground. Wood, like most fires and most things, does emit smoke. And if you're burning green wood, and we'll get into that a little bit more, that really puts out a lot of smoke, and that can, again, cause irritation and problems to people with breathing problems. Wood, or using wood, can be a fire hazard, especially with older stoves or fireplaces that haven't been maintained. Creosote buildup in chimneys, sparks, things like that. So there are some hazards to burning wood. Bringing wood in from outside of our local area can transport invasive pests. And the emerald ash borer was actually moved from one place to another by firewood. And wood is time consuming. So you have to stack it. You have to, if you're doing it all yourself, you have to cut it and split it and dry it. And even when you're burning it, you can't just walk away for hours on end. You have to continue to watch and feed your wood stove. And finally, you need a place to store the wood. And we'll get into some of those areas in a little bit later in the presentation. But we can mitigate some of those disadvantages. And that's by the proper installation of stove or fireplace or your burning device. And if you upgrade to a more efficient model and keep your chimneys and pipes clean, then you have the most efficient type of burning. You don't want to burn green or treated or painted wood. Those types of woods will create some more smoke and will actually smolder rather than burn. Dried wood burns a lot cleaner. And you want to air dry the wood that you're going to use for firewood for maximum efficiency. And we'll cover more about that later as well. The other benefit and mitigation for burning wood is we can use the ash for traction under tires. When we have days like we did just 2 days ago when we had a lot of snow, ash can actually be a really good traction. And you can also use it in the garden. Wood ash, true wood ash, raises the pH of acidic soils, and 1 cord of a heavier firewood can actually produce up to 60 pounds of ash. And as I said, you can put that right into your garden, and that could be a benefit to your plants. So that's the first. I'll just kind of pause there and see if anybody has any questions on anything there.
Actually, I do. I have
Okay.
a question. When you were talking about the invasive species, you said the emerald ash borer. is another invasive species, that pesky lanternfly. Is that known to go along with firewood as well?
Well, the spotted lanternfly will actually attach itself to almost anything. Firewood being one, but anything from wood to people's vehicles to railroad cars. And that's what is so concerning about that particular pest, is because it literally hitchhikes on almost anything. And it can move very, very quickly.
Oh, sorry, we're getting a little interference here.
That's okay.
Just a moment. I'll try to get her to mute.
Yeah, mute.
Okay, there we go. Sorry about that, folks. Okay, Cecile, and so the spotted lanternfly is on anything, but the main pest on firewood then is that emerald ash borer.
Yeah, the emerald ash borer actually is in the wood itself, and it can, the only way to actually kill it, beside using chemical treatment on the tree, is high heat kiln drying. So actually putting the wood in an oven kills that pest, but otherwise it's actually in the wood, right under the bark, in those first layers of wood. And as people would move firewood, and ash is a very favorable favorite wood type to move and use for firewood, people move that particular insect in the larval stage from one place to another.
Okay, that's kind of pretty interesting. Well, thank you. Does anyone else have any questions for Cecile about the first part of our presentation? I'm not seeing anything in the chat, so if you want to continue on, maybe they're absorbing it in and they're coming up with questions. They'll have them at the end for you.
Well, this isn't a lot of the stuff I'm giving isn't rocket science, but they are really good reminders. So the next section is on what to burn. So the heat that we get from firewood is measured in what we call BTUs, which stands for British Thermal Units. And that's a basic measure of thermal or heat energy. And 1 BTU equals the amount of energy needed to increase 1 pound of water 1 degrees Fahrenheit. And how many BTUs a particular firewood is rated is dependent on the density of the wood, the moisture or moisture content of the wood, and those are both very dependent on the species of tree that you're using for firewood. And it also, the BTU is also dependent on the efficiency of the wood burning device or your stove. So all wood has weight, and that's reported in pounds per cord. And we'll get into a little bit more about what a cord is under firewood measurements. But when we say that the firewood is green, that means it's freshly cut. And it is a lot heavier because it contains the most amount of water. When firewood is called seasoned, that means that the firewood has been dried out. It's been left out to dry, usually just in the air, and it's lighter because the water has evaporated. Now, tonight I'm not going to get into kiln drying, and things like that, but we're going to be talking about what people can do just at their homes, which would be air drying. And why this is so important is because it takes about 1,200 BTUs to vaporize 1 pound of water. So the more water you have in your wood, the more energy it's going to take to vaporize the water, and you're not going to get that in heat return for the wood. So that's why the idea of seasoning your wood and air drying it is so important. So I mentioned that the moisture content is the amount of moisture reported as a percent in wood. And ideally, we want to reduce the natural moisture content to 20% to really maximize our burning. And I said this is very dependent on species. Up on the screen here is a chart, and you can see that there's a list of species on the left, and the moisture dry weight, and that is the moisture above the desired 20%. So you can see that ash has the lowest moisture above the 20% of 15. So, we're talking about even when ash is green, it only has a 35% moisture green weight. And that's why it has such a high green ranking. And so even when it's green, people can still burn ash trees very efficiently. Now, if you look down the chart into something like red oak has a 31% over the 20%. So you're already at over a 50% moisture, and you have to bring that down to 20% to really have efficient burning. When we are talking about how much heat a particular firewood species produces, we again talk about BTUs. And the higher the BTU, the more heat a species produces. And in my next chart here, and this is information from the US Forest Service, you'll see that in the very last column, you'll see some numbers, and that is the heat produced per cord in BTUs. And what you're looking for is the highest number. And so for that, you'll see that the red oak produces a 24 BTU as compared to farther down in the chart, black cherry only produces a 19.9. So if you have a choice and you're burning firewood and you're burning it for heat, you really want to try and pick those species that are going to put out the most heat for all the effort that you're going to put in. Now, there's other things that you might want to consider also. Is it easy to split if you're going to be doing that yourself? Is it smoky? Does it throw sparks? So softwoods, so our pines and our conifers, our spruces, hemlocks, they tend to produce more smoke and produce more sap. And for indoor burning, we really don't recommend the use of those conifer species. We recommend the hardwoods. A lot of people have the outdoor furnaces, and they can use literally any of the species. And this is just a partial list, but you can literally use any species for some of those outdoor burning. I'll pause there. I see that there might be a question in the chat.
There's a comment in the chat, but not a question in the chat.
Okay.
So one thing that I remember when we had our summer camp program here at Drakewell was we were talking with the children about the how to identify trees and things. And I am horrible because I don't remember what tree it was, But I do remember the gentleman told us, never use this tree to roast marshmallows. It has arsenic in it.
Yep.
And then he said, and if you can't roast marshmallows with it, also don't burn it. And I don't remember what tree that was now.
That was black cherry.
That's it. Black cherry. Yep. Don't
It
use
is.
it for roasting your marshmallows, and don't use
No.
it for fire.
And if you're using, as far as roasting marshmallows or using it for a hot dog stick, the amount of arsenic that would be emitted into your food would be very, very small. But it would probably taint the taste of your marshmallows and s'mores and your hot dogs. So we really don't recommend that. There are a lot of other tree species, and if you remember what it looked like, the bark looks like burnt potato chips or burnt corn flakes. So that's a good way of telling the black cherry apart. And it's also a tree that can be poisonous to livestock, since we're talking about that. If a branch breaks off or partially breaks off and is hanging over a livestock field, and either horses or cows eat it, they can actually get very sick, and it can be fatal, because what happens is when the branch is just partially broken off, the arsenic actually concentrates, the poisons concentrate, and that's what makes it so toxic to animals. So you really want to try and not have black cherries and black walnut trees around your livestock fields. So I'm getting off my
So,
easy to get foresters talking about trees, and we get off track easily.
but it's okay to burn black cherry if you have to.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you can. Yep.
I guess that was my question. Was it, if you can't roast a marshmallow on it, can you burn it?
Yes, you can.
Okay. Anyone else have any questions? I think everybody's still processing. It's a lot to take in and remember. Okay. I'll keep an eye on the chat, Cecile.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about firewood measurements. So I've mentioned already a couple times the term cord, and a cord of wood is a neatly stacked rectangle measuring 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 8 foot long. And it's pictured here on the screen, and that's 120 cubic feet of wood. And to get that cord, you can, if you're burning 12-inch or 1 foot sections, you would need 4 rows of the 1 foot sections. If you were burning 16-inch pieces, you would need 3 rows. 24 or 2 foot sections, you would need 2 rows. And as pictured here, if you had 48 or 4 foot long sections, then you would just need 1 row of wood. And a question we usually get is, what is a face cord? And a face cord is pictured right down here at the lower left column picture, and it is a stack of wood that measures 4 feet tall and 8 foot in length, but there is no width determined. And so, as you could see by these pictures, the first picture that I pointed to, the one on the left, the face cord is 12 inches. A face cord of 12-inch logs would only be 1/4 of a cord, or 32 cubic feet. And a face cord of 16-inch logs, the next one, would be a third of a cord. A face cord of 2-foot logs would be a half. And if you actually had a face cord of 48 or 4-foot logs, then it would be a full cord. But that's where the confusion often arises. Is if somebody is trying to sell a face cord, you don't really know whether you're getting the whole 128 cubic feet or you're only getting a portion of that. And there's also another term called a rick, and that's just like the gentleman's name, R-I-C-K. And all that means is that's a stack of wood or a pile of wood. And there's really no dimension or no size limit or minimum to that. So if somebody tries to sell you a rick of wood, I would be probably a little suspicious. So perhaps you might want to know how much firewood fits in a pickup truck. And that depends on how big the pickup truck is. So as my graphic here shows, let's just look at the standard pickup, which is a 1/2 ton or 3/4 ton. If you stack firewood up to just below the top of the bed, that's going to be about a third of a cord. If you kind of mound it up a little bit over the truck bed, then you're probably going to be pretty close to a 1/2 of a cord. And if you actually stack the firewood up to the top of the cab, then you're probably going to be pretty close to a cord. And if you have a 1-ton truck and you stack it up all the way to the top, then you're probably looking at 2 cords. So again, this is just a rough estimate, kind of a rule of thumb. But some of you may be wondering, if you're out in the woods, how many trees would it take to make a cord? So it, again, just like with the pickups, it depends on the size of your trees. So if you are cutting 6-inch trees at DBH, and DBH is a forestry term called that means diameter at breast height, which is 4.5 feet above the ground, and that's where we usually measure the tree. And we're looking at the diameter of a tree. So if you have a 6-inch diameter tree, you need about 10 trees to make a cord. You have an 8-inch diameter tree, then you would need about 8 trees. 10-inch tree at DBH, you'd only need 6. And if you have a 19 or 20-inch diameter tree, you would only actually need 1 tree to actually make a cord. So on average, since you don't always get, 10 trees that are 6 inches or 8 trees that are 8 inches, on average, about 10 pole-sized trees makes up a cord. So I'll pause right there, because I know I was throwing out a lot of numbers, and I'll see if there's any questions.
At the moment, there are no questions in the chat. I giggled when I saw the 3/4 of a cord of wood in the pickup truck, where it's up to the height of the cab of the truck. And a couple days ago, going through town, there was a truck that was up to the cab of the truck and a little bit beyond. And so I guess he maybe had 1.25 cords of wood going through, and yeah, so that's kind of interesting to see, to kind of put that in perspective about how much wood that actually is. And that's really
these are just estimates, but if you're going to, especially if you're using firewood as your main heating source, you may know that you need at least 4 cords of wood or something like that. So you're going to need several pickup truck loads,
right.
And that's good to know.
Okay. Any questions from anybody? Don't forget, you can put them in the chat if something pops into your head.
So let's talk a little bit about firewood preparation. So how long does it take? Well, firewood is kind of like farming. You can't, you have to think ahead. And you actually need to start preparing about 9 months to a year ahead in order to have properly seasoned or dried firewood. They say if you split and stack early in the spring, that's good timing for a winter burn. So as we're trying to stay warm in these cold temperatures that we've been having, well, starting today and through this weekend, this would not be the time to be cutting firewood. One of the things you want to think about when you are cutting or firewood is you want to cut it to length. So you want to measure your stove or your fireplace ahead of time, because the worst thing that can happen is that you cut all this firewood and then you find out that it's too long to fit into your burning device. And a lot of the stoves, especially the newer ones, have very narrow openings or very narrow burning areas. And so you have to really watch the size of, particularly the length of the piece of firewood that you're going to put in it. The other thing you want to kind of think ahead is where to locate the wood pile and how to stack it. So you want to put your wood pile in a convenient, semi-permanent, because it is going to sit there for 9 months to a year location, not next to your house, because that is actually becomes a wildfire risk if there is a wildfire that we have in the area and sparks can actually lodge into firewood piles, and the firewood piles can actually cause the house to catch on fire. So you don't want to have your firewood right up against the house. Also, firewood piles can attract rodents and other pests, and mice are fine when they're away from the house, but we certainly don't want them in our house. You also want to stack the wood off the ground. Wood stored on the ground will absorb the moisture, and so it's kind of counterproductive if you're air drying it for those 9 months to have it sitting on the ground and taking in the moisture. So that's want to keep it off. And you also want to leave some air around, or some space around your rows of wood. 6 inches is all that you need, and that's to encourage airflow, because as the wood begins to air dry, it will actually the moisture will actually come out of the ends of the wood. So I'll pause there and see if it has any questions about preparation. Sarah, do you have any questions about?
I see no questions in the chat at the moment, and I particularly do not have any questions that I can think of offhand. Covering firewood. When people cover firewood, when you were just saying about the 6 inches of, air around it, so tarping the whole thing would not be a good idea. Just tarping the top.
So if the picture behind me shows a firewood pile that does have a tarp on the top. Really, while you're letting it air dry, keeping it as open as possible is the best thing. So once you hit that 9-month point or that year point, then you can start putting a tarp over it. But really, the best thing is to have it open to the air and open to the sun to get the maximum drying. If you have, some people have wood sheds, those are, and they have some platforms that keep the wood off the ground, and they don't actually put the wood all the way up to the top. So there's some airspace between the roof and the firewood, and that really facilitates the drying as well. So that's ideal, but not everybody has the ability to actually have a firewood shed. So keeping it neatly stacked, allowing both ends to be open, and really keeping it open to the air and the sun is the best thing.
Thank you. All right, people are still pondering questions. I know they are. They're coming up with some good ones. So we will continue on.
Okay, well, let's talk about firewood tools. And as we talk about going out into the woods and doing any work, the first things we need to talk about is safety, and we need to stay safe when we're cutting firewood. So you want to have safety glasses, because oftentimes when you're working with wood, you have little bits of wood or sawdust flying, and you don't want that getting in your eye and causing damage. If you're using any type of equipment like chainsaws or log splitters, you definitely want to have hearing protection, because that can be damaging to your ears as well. You want to always protect your head with either a helmet or a hard hat. And a lot of the hard hats actually have face protection. So they have a visor that comes down, they have the ear protection that's attached, and the adequate head protection. A pair of gloves, because you're going to be handling materials and equipment and things like that. Chaps to protect your legs, and chaps are made of a particular type of material that if a chainsaw comes in contact with the chap, instead of cutting through it, the chap gets embroiled in the chain of the chainsaw, and it doesn't mean that your legs still might get cut, but it's going to gum up the chain and the chainsaw, and it's going to protect you from serious injury. And I know a lot of people who have experienced that, and they're very glad that they had the chaps on. And then boots, a good pair of boots to protect your feet. I also want to mention that if you are out actually felling trees or cutting trees for firewood, it's always a good thing to let somebody know that you're out and where you're going to be. Even the most experienced woodcutter will tell you that accidents happen. You fell a tree and it falls into another tree, and accidents, and we certainly don't want anyone to be, part of that. So always let somebody know if you are cutting firewood and where you're doing that. So for just some cutting tools, here we have the chainsaw, and you want to have a sharp chain. And with that, you want to actually have a sharpener with you, because depending on the type of wood, there are some types of trees that will actually dull chains faster than other types. If anyone is familiar with a tree species called blue beech or musclewood, some people call it ironwood, but it's a smaller tree that is very common around here. And it is very, very tough. In fact, people will oftentimes pull a joke on people and put a couple pieces in a splitting or a cutting pile of firewood, just to make somebody struggle. So it's, and it tends to dull the chains. So you definitely want to have a sharpener. You'll need bar and chain oil to keep your chainsaws running smoothly. Of course, gasoline. There are some wedges in the front of this picture, and that's to make sure a tree falls where you want it to. You might need a log jack, which is also called a cant hook or a PV or a log lifter. And that tool isn't pictured here, but it's a tool that allows you to leverage and actually move a longer piece of log around. Might need an axe or a sledge. And I think also in the picture is even a debarker. So there's a lot of tools that you can use, and they make the job easier. Some of the splitting tools might be an axe. Some of the splitting mauls that we saw in the earlier picture, or you might use actually a gasoline powered log splitter. So those are some of the tools that we use for processing firewood. And I'll kind of pause there.
No questions in the chat. Now, so my one question, Cecile, is obviously, like me as a homeowner, being a new homeowner and you know, just starting out with having a fireplace and things, I'm not going to run out and buy a chainsaw, you know. But what are like the must, like what would you say would be the must haves, like the very basics? Like if I am going to get firewood delivered to my home, and I'm going to stack it, and I might maybe I ordered it in, you know, maybe I ordered it incorrectly and it needs to be, you know, I do have to cut it down. What are the basic tools maybe that I should have on hand?
Okay, so you definitely want to have a good sharp axe. You want to have some splitting mauls, and let me just go back one picture. Some of those are good splitting mauls there that you see. You want to create some kind of platform, and it can be as simple as another log, because one of the things that dulls equipment most quickly, both chainsaw chains and axes, is if you drive them into the ground. So you want to keep them up off the ground and keep them actually in wood as much as possible. So I think for the kind of the homeowner, a really good axe that you can swing, that you're comfortable swinging, and there's different weights of axes, so you might want to try a couple out.
Just go to True Value and just start swinging them in the aisle. See which one fits and which is comfortable.
I guarantee you would get help.
Yep.
You would get a lot of assistance.
Yep.
And really, just, you know, probably an axe and maybe a splitting maul and maybe a wedge or something is really all you'd need to
okay.
Yep.
And I won't go to True Value and start swinging axes to test them.
Well, if I hear that somebody did that, I'm going to know who it is.
I'll behave myself. Okay.
So sources of firewood. Not everyone is lucky enough to have a woods in their own backyard or having a source of their own firewood. And if you still want to cut your own, but you don't have a source, you can go to some of our public lands. And the Pennsylvania Bureau of Forestry does issue permits to cut firewood on our state forest land. And I believe some of the state parks do as well. A permit is required, and you get that permit from our office in Warren. The cost is $20 a cord, and the maximum is 2 cords per permit and 5 cords per household per year. And we issue the permits for household use or personal use only. So you can't go into into firewood business by cutting off the state forest. The permits are good for 90 days. And we ask that people only cut down dead wood for their firewood. Another source of firewood is the Allegheny National Forest, and they also issue permits. It's $20 for about 4 cords, and with both agencies, people are not. We do not have forestry rangers out measuring your cords or anything. It's just kind of on the honor system. But we also are very familiar with that other chart that I showed you, how much wood fits in a pickup truck. So if you're out on our state forest and I asked to see your firewood permit, and you're required to carry it with you, and it says that you have 1 cord and you have one of those big 1-ton trucks and you have it brimming, you know, I'm going to pretty much know that you have a little bit more than a cord there. But again, getting back to the Allegheny National Forest, it's $20 for about 4 cords, and then $5 a cord for each cord over the first 4. On the National Forest, they issue you a personal map that has some defined no-cut areas, because they have specific areas that you're allowed to cut and other areas that you're not. And again, on their property, only dead trees can be utilized. I'll make a mention that game lands and the Game Commission does not allow firewood cutting on the Pennsylvania game lands. So I'll ask if anybody has any questions there on how to get.
I don't see any as of yet. I think that's quite fascinating. I had no idea that you could go on to the state, get the permit and do that. I always thought that, I mean, I knew that people did go in, but I thought that was, I don't know what I thought they were cutting the wood for.
Well, the park, like Oral Creek State Park, does do some of their own firewood cutting to supply their Adirondack shelters and things like that.
Right.
And but yes, we do. There's a lot of people who are very dependent on our 2.2 million acres of state forest land as a source of firewood, because either they have the outdoor burners or they have indoor wood stoves that they use for their primary source of heat. So
now with the Allegheny National Forest here in Titusville, we're, a bit outside that area. We could not go to the Allegheny National Forest and bring here, because would that be considered local?
That's still considered local. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Any of the areas here in the Northwest, when we talk about bringing wood in, that would be, I would really discourage people from bringing from the Southwest, so from the Pittsburgh area, south of Pittsburgh, or even out of state up here, because that's a pretty far distance. Bringing wood from, Harrisburg or even Eastern Pennsylvania. If you're going to go somewhere and you're going to have a fire and things like that, try and utilize locally sourced wood. Again, it's good for the local economy, and it's usually pretty readily available, and that's really the best thing to use.
Okay. That's very helpful. As I said, I'm really, my mind is blown that you can get the permit for the Allegheny National Forest. So
Yep.
mine, yeah, definitely mind blown. Does anyone else have any questions for Cecile? If you think of a question, maybe you're like me, and as soon as you lay your head on the pillow, something pops into your head. You can always email myself here at Drakewell Museum. My email is, and I'll put it in the chat, it's sargoodman@pa.gov, and I can get that message to Cecile, that question to Cecile, for her to respond to you. Or if you're not an email fan, you can always call Drakewell and we'll get you in touch with Cecile at the district office. I'm sure you can also probably look Cecile up on the DCNR forestry website too. I believe your contact information is on there, so you can always check out. And the DCNR's webpage, isn't it dcnr.pa.gov?
Yep.
So
So it's our main office and where I work out of is in Warren, but we actually have offices located in all of our northwestern counties. So there's a service forester in Waterford, one in Meadville, one at Oral Creek State Park, and we have our state forest headquarters over near Tionesta. So really, if you call any of our offices, we would be more than happy to help you and provide you any more information about anything. I showed you examples of some charts that showed the moisture content and the BTU of particular species. You know, if there's a lot of different sources out there on the internet for those charts. I picked the one that was easiest for me, that we use or we refer to a lot. But if you're unable to find any of those, please feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be happy to drop you a packet in the mail.
sounds great, Cecile. Thank you. And I also can attest to when she listed all of those trees, if you are still someone who doesn't know your trees, the DCNR website also has a great guide to listing, what to look for each tree, how to identify trees.
Yep.
And it's not
that Common Trees of Pennsylvania booklet, and it is by far our most popular publication. And I can't even tell you what edition it is, because it's been around for years and years.
My copy is very well loved. I have carried it from every museum I've worked at, basically from Eastern Pennsylvania across the state, now here to Drakewell. I am sad to say, though, at the moment, that I put it in a safe place here at the well and I can't find it. So I'm using a new copy. And I'm not too happy with it because it just doesn't have all my little notes and things in it. So I'm desperately looking for that copy here, and it's got my name across it in big black letters. So nobody should have my copy, but I'll find it. I will find it. I tucked it in a safe place. So I will definitely look that up. Does anyone have any questions or anything for this evening's program? Cecile, thank you so very much for taking the time this evening to speak with us and to remind us all about kind of the do's and don'ts of firewood, and to refresh our memories on some things that we might have known and just forgot. Some of us out there have been using firewood for so long in our homes and things that we just kind of forget, and it's like, oh, wait a minute, like started doing a bad habit and then just continued on with it. It's like, wait a minute. Just because I've been doing it for years, it's not the correct way. So you've opened my eyes to a couple things going, oh yeah, that's right. Don't do that. Don't do this. Do this. So I thank you so much for helping out with that.
Before I go, I have a poem that I'd like to share with everybody because it's
Okay.
been my pleasure to spend the last hour with everyone. And I hope you all have a warm and healthy winter. But this is from E.M. Hall's poem book of the Gale, and it's called The Woodcutter's Song. So maybe this will leave you with some final tips of about firewood. So, oak logs will warm you well that are old and dry. Logs of pine will sweetly smell, but the sparks will fly. Birch logs will burn too fast. Chestnut scarce at all. Hawthorn logs are good to last. Cut them in the fall. Holly logs will burn like wax. You may burn them green. Elm logs like to smoldering flax, no flame to be seen. Beech logs for winter time, yew logs as well. Green elder logs, it is a crime for any man to sell. Pear logs and apple logs, they will scent your room. Cherry logs across the dogs, smell like the flower of broom. Ash logs, smooth and gray, burn them green or old. Buy up all that come your way, worth their weight in gold. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and have a warm and wonderful winter season.
Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Our next Winter Academy will be on Thursday, February 10th at 6:30, and that will be William Smith, or as we call him, Uncle Billy, who was the driller and blacksmith of the Drake Well. And that will be presented by Jennifer Ford, who is the executive director of the Butler County Historical Society. So please join us on February 10th for that program. And thank you all for attending tonight, and we hope to see you on February 10th. Thank you so much, Cecile. It was good to see you this evening, and hope to work with you again soon. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you for attending.